Future Indicative, Chapter 19. Roots and stems. There probably has been some confusion as you've read about what is a root and what is a stem, and this is something that varies very much with grammarians, but this is the way that Mounce wants you to understand it. There is outside there a root, which is the ancient source of the word. And we'll say this is bal for balo. Okay? And this is a word that, or a prefix or something that meant something about throwing. There are 6 possible stems for each verb corresponding to tense, although few words have that many that are different. In other words, there's only one root that we're going to deal with, but there can be multiple stems. So, balo, which we'll look at as we go along, the present has 2 lambdas, and that's the stem is bal with 2 lambdas. And what we're going to be looking at today, the future stem, has only 1 lambda, and that would be considered its stem, its future stem. And then there are 4 other stems, which we're going to be looking at a little bit later. And these comprise what is called the 6 principal parts. That is, when you learn a verb, there are only 6 parts that may have a different stem. Some verbs are extremely regular, like luo, the most regular of all Greek verbs. It is one that has the same stem in all of its principal parts. You just have to learn the endings. Now, the reason I've done balo and bal here, you're going to find out as we go along and look at the different forms. Future indicative, 2nd principal part. The first principal part was the present indicative, and the future indicative is the 2nd. The Greek future functions very much the same way it does in English. That is, it talks about future time. The future has a tense formative, a sigma. The sigma tells us that the verb is in the future, and that sigma lies between the end of the verb stem and the beginning of the ending. So before in the present we had luo, I am loosing. Now we have luso, I will loose. Deponents take middle endings, just as they did in the present. However, deponents that were deponents in the present may not be deponents in the future, and vice versa. There are 3 distinct voice endings in Greek in the future indicative. They are active, subject acts, middle, mostly deponent, reflexive or other meanings, and passive, that the subject is acted upon. The future active indicative components. The future active indicative, of course, the mood is indicative, and all of the tenses that we will have this semester will be indicative. The tense is the future tense, and the stem is the future as well. Let me explain this. The tense is the name future. So tense is the name of the tense. So the tense is future. Stem is the stem that whatever tense is built upon. So in this case, the tense is future, and the stem that it builds upon is also the future stem. The aspect is usually undefined. Rather than the water will be falling, which would follow from the present, the default is going to be the water will fall. The voice can be active, the subject acts. Middle, which can be deponent, reflexive, or have other meanings. And the passive, the subject is acted upon. The passive will be looked at later, but the important thing to note is that the future has three separate voices. The middle passive, unlike the present, is not used. There is an active, a middle, and a passive that are all different. There is no prefix. Remember, prefix is limited to past tenses. The tense formative, our first, is a sigma, and the endings, like the present, are primary. Formation of a present verb. This is a little bit of review. Remember, the present verb is formed by the present stem. In this case, it's lu, and lu is the stem in all stems. That's why we use it. And the primary endings. In this case, amen. In this case, the first person plural. And we would get luamen, we are loosing, or we loose. Remember, in the present, we want to have the continuous be our default. So we want we are loosing to be the default with the understanding that we loose is also grammatically correct. Formation of the future verb. We have lu, and this time we have a future stem, but of course with lu there are no changes in all the stems, so they all look alike, but you need to remember the formation here is with a future stem. And we're going to add primary endings, just like we did in the present. In fact, we're adding the identical endings that we added in the present. And the only difference is we are going to add a tense formative, in this case a sigma, that tells us this is the future. If luamen, we would get lusamen, we will loose. Future active indicative of luo. We have the stem lu all the way through, and the endings are oase a, amen ete usi, the ones you know by heart now. These are the primary active endings. And then for the tense formative, we're just going to drop a sigma. So the word is going to be luso, I will loose. Second person will be luces, you will lose. Third person will be luce, he, she, it will lose. And in the plural, lusamen, we will lose. Lucete, you all will lose. And lususi, they will lose. So let's do a little bit of moving forward. Let's move from the present and move into the future. So this is actually the conjugation of the present active indicative, luo, lues, lue. And we made a sentence here with auta, it afterwards. So the sentence was luo auta, I am loosing it, with the continuous form I am loosing in the present. All we're going to do is move it over and drop in a sigma, and we get luso auta, which means I will loose. Same in the second person, that sigma falls in, luces auta, you will loose it. Third person drops right in, luce auta, he, she, it is loosing it before, and he, she, it will loose it. Luamen auta, we are loosing it. We're going to dump a sigma. Come on, sigma. Lusamen auta is we will loose it. Luete auta was you are loosing it. Come on, come on. Lusete auta, you are loosing it. And then finally, luusin auta, they are loosing it. And we are going to dump again a sigma and get they will loose it. The future middle indicative of pορεύομαι, a deponent. One of the things that you want to remember about the future is that it has three separate voices. It has an active, it has a middle, and it has a passive that we haven't studied yet. However, the deponents are the main reason why the middle is used. As far as we're going to do, we can think of the fact of the middle being a place for deponents. So let's go ahead and look at it. We'll have the stem, which is Peru. I'm going to Peru. The endings are the same as the middle endings for the present. Omai, a, etai. And the plural, ametha, esta, ontai. Then we have the tense formative. It's the same tense formative. It's a sigma. And we just drop that in. So instead of having πορεύομαι, which would have been the present form, we have πορεύομαι, I will go. In the second singular, instead of having πορεύε in the singular, we will have πορεύσαι. Πορεύσαι is you will go. Πορεύσεται is he, she, it will go. And then in the plural, the same tense formative, πορεύσαμεθα, we will go. πορεύσεστε, you all will go. And πορεύσανται, they will go. Parsing a future active. This is not much different from parsing a present active. The only difference is going to be the tense. Remember, the endings are all identical, so there's not going to be any confusion here. So let's look at something. Lusete, that ending there, that ete, we know is second person plural. The tense is given by the tense formative, the sigma, and tells us its future. The voice, ete, is active. And the mood throughout is going to be indicative. The lexical form is going back to the beginning, to your vocabulary word, which is luo. And the meaning is you, plural, will loose. Parsing a future deponent. Parsing a future deponent is not going to be any different than parsing a present deponent, except for the tense formative right now. So we're going to get πορεύσεται, and if it were the singular, it would be πορεύεται. The person, that tau tells us, and it's a third person, it is singular. The tense is future, tense formative here. The voice is active. The mood throughout is indicative. The lexical form, we go back to the beginning, and it's πορεύομαι. It would be a deponent otherwise. And the meaning is he, she, it will go. Now there are changes to the stem. We can predict that after all I went through and you all felt really good, there are changes that happen to the stem. There are changes that are very, very consistent to the stem that I'm going to go through. Square of stops, future. Since the tense formative for the future is a sigma, an S, stems ending with consonants are going to merge with this sigma in very predictable ways. Now, we've seen this before. This same merger occurs in third declension nouns. Remember, if we have sark, which ends with a kappa, and the masculine singular nominative would add a sigma to it, Sark goes to sarx, flesh. Refresh our memory of the square of stops. The labials, p, b, f, p, beta, phi, if they touch a sigma, the resulting is a psi. Makes a lot of sense, right? P plus S is ps, psi. So, in a verb that has a stem blep, if it touches a sigma, it's going to turn to bleps. So its future is actually going to be a merger of the sigma and the final consonant. So blepo, I am seeing, the future form is blepso, I will see. Same way the velars, kagacha, kappa, gamma, chi. If they touch a sigma, they're going to present a kasi, right? K plus S is ks. Kappa plus sigma is a kasi. So, if the stem of a verb ends with a kappa, diok, and it is future, a sigma has to be added, and we will get dioks. So that dioko, I am pursuing, its future will be diokso, I will pursue. Dentals. Remember, that's the tongue against the teeth. So we have tadatha, or tau, delta, theta. If they touch a sigma, it merges and we're left with a sigma. So, if we have path as a stem, and we add a sigma to it, we're going to get pace. So, patho, I am persuading, its future will be peso, I will persuade. Future active examples. These are just a few examples to follow up what we've been talking about. Lususi ton aklan, third person plural ending there. Oese ameneti usi. That sigma is a tense formative. So we have third person plural future. They will loose the crowd. Blepsete ton aklan. A little more difficult was blepo and blepete, but that sigma has merged with a P, right? That's going to happen. Blepsete ton aklan is the future now. Y'all will see the crowd. Ha-aklos blepse tomethetain. So this is going to happen every time you have a plural. Third person singular here, so we go outside looking for a subject, and we get ha-aklos. So the crowd will see the disciple. Lusamen tan aklan. Lusamen, standard. Oese amenete usi. We will loose the crowd. Blepses tan aklan. That ace, second person singular ending. You will see the crowd. Rules for future contract verbs. You might remember the present contract is really complicated. You had omicrons coming across epsilons and alphas, and this doesn't happen in the future because of that sigma. The sigma separates the final part of the verb, which is the pronominal endings, from the stem of the verb, which has a final vowel at the end. So, if you remember, contract verbs are formed if the stem of the verb ends in a vowel, specifically alpha, epsilon, and omicron. Because of the tense formative sigma, vowels cannot merge with the vowels at the end. They can only change or expand in one of two ways. So, if there is at the end of the stem an alpha or an epsilon, it will expand to an eta. So, agapao, I love, expands to agapeso, I will love. And look how that eta there is merely an expansion of the alpha and no merging. Poieo, I do, its future will be the same, poieso, because alpha and epsilon both expand to an eta. So poieso, I will do. And omicron expands to an omega. Makes sense, right? Short vowels are expanding to long vowels. So, plerao, I fill, will expand in the future to pleroso, I will fill. It's important that you see that the ending is in no way affected here. This is merely a contract verb that's crashing up against a sigma and forcing it up like the continental divide. Future verb patterns. We're going to look at the patterns of futures, and you're going to find out that they're not that complicated. Pattern 1, the standard addition of a sigma. Remember, the sigma is the tense formative, so the simplest form of the future is the addition of the tense formative between the stem and the ending. The first one is the stem is not modified at all. This is not the most common one, but we have it with luo, and the future is luso. You'll see that sigma there, the tense formative, between lu, which is the stem, and omega, which is the pronominal ending, and nothing has changed. The second one, the stem ends in a vowel and changes according to contract verb rules. Now, these, remember, I just went through these, are a lot simpler than we had before. So, alpha or epsilon is going to go to an eta. So, agapao will go to agapeso. And the third one is it ends in a stop and it merges according to square of stops. So blepo, that P there, when it touches a sigma, is going to merge. So blepo, I see, is going to become belepso, I will see. Two different roots. This is the most difficult one, and each piece must be memorized. What's happened in Greek, and it happens in many languages, is that different words fall out of use for different tenses. We have it in English with go, went, gone. Went is actually from a totally different verb than go is from. So instead of go, goed, gone, we have go, went. And went is actually the past tense of wend. So what's happened is verbs have merged together. So the present is one root, comes from one root, and the past comes from a different. The same thing happens in Greek. Different roots occur in different tenses, and they must be memorized. So let's look at one, the present and the future. We have erchomai, one of the most used words in Greek. If you know nothing else, you must know this and its forms. Erchomai is I am coming. Its future is elusomai, I will come. But you'll see that they are totally different words. And they must be learned as that. On your vocabulary card, learn elusomai as I will come and erchomai as I am coming. Lego, I am saying, its future is ero. I will say. There's no way of knowing that ero is the future of Lego because they come from totally different roots. Horao, one of the big ones, to see, but this is also to understand. Horao, I am seeing. Its future is opsomai, I will see. Now, you see where this comes from. Ophthalmos, its future opsomai, makes a lot of sense. It just doesn't come from horao. The other thing we want to know is some verbs are deponent in both the present and the future. In the case of erchomai, the future is elusomai. It's also a deponent. But that's not always true. If you look at horao, which is an active ending, its future opsomai has a middle ending. So the present is active, the future is a deponent. The third pattern is the liquid future. And I have here the limner. And the reason I use limner is that there are 4 consonants in any language that cause problems. They are lambda, mu, nu, and rho. And in any language, they're going to cause a problem before an ending. They do different things. So, the stems will end in what is called a liquid consonant. Limners are liquid consonants. And the limner doesn't display the tense formative sigma. This is going to be one of our hardest ones because there's no sigma there. So let's look at the forms. The first one stays the same. Krino is to judge. Its future is krino, and you'll notice that the accent has moved over, and krino in all of its forms will look identical to an epsilon contract verb. That's one way you're going to know it. You're going to look at it, you're going to say, this comes from krineo, because it is identical to an epsilon contract, but it is krino. So the present endings and the future endings are absolutely identical. The double lambda goes to the single lambda. This is very, very common. So balo, I throw. The future will be balo with only one lambda. The thing about the future, the present, is it is the most irregular stem. Once we get past the present, what you'll see is the stems are going to look much, much more regular. And the iota, I row, falls out in the future as well in the liquid. So I row, and you'll see that liquid row there. Anytime you see a liquid, row, lambda, nu here, expect something. So I row merely goes to a row with the accent on the omega, and the iota falls out. The fourth are the irregular. Now, Mouse does not like the term irregular in terms of Greek because everything has an explanation. Of course, if you looked at any language in the world, everything has an explanation. But there are certain things that it is very difficult to determine some kind of flow, and I call them irregular. So, these are verbs whose stems consistently change. That is, in the different tenses, the stems consistently change. They display in the future the tense formative sigma, and there's no way out but to memorize them. The present stem will usually lose a consonant or an iota, as we saw a little bit earlier, but it may lose entire groups. Remember, the present is the most irregular form of it. So, common to present stems ending in sigma, kappa, or iota. And one of the most important ones is ginosko. You'll see that not only does it have a sigma kappa, but it has a iota, which is bound to be lost anyway. If this were so what we're getting in the future is gamma nu omega, right? Ginosk is reduced to gno, which will be the stem throughout. So gnosko becomes gnosomai. And this is the word that gnosis comes from, or Gnostic. Just a note here, this verb has active endings in the present, gnosko, that omega, and it has middle endings, it is a deponent, in the future. Vocabulary chapter 19. Give yourself a hand. You're at chapter 19 already. Basileus. 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 This is third declension, masculine, king. Genao. 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 Genao is I beget, give birth to, or produce. One of the things to remember about this one is that it has two news. There are other words that look very much like it, but this is the only one that has two news. Zao. 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 I live. Iudaia. 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 First declension, feminine, Judea. Iudaios. 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 212 declension, adjective. The adjective means Jewish, the noun means Jew. Israel. 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 Masculine, indeclinable, Israel. Karpas. 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 Second declension, masculine, fruit, crop, or result. Maison. 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 Maison is a 3-3 declension. Maison is masculine and feminine, and that on, maison, is a neuter form. So this is a 3-3 declension, greater. Halas. 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 Halas is a noun, 212 declension. Adjective means whole or complete, and the adverb means entirely. Proskuneo. 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 This is an epsilon contract, obviously. I worship.